Okay, morning everyone. Nice to see you here. Happy Friday. Welcome to the almost weekend. Just got a few things to clear up today and then I can set you free, although I know you might have some other classes after this, but that's the best I can do. So who's here? Casey is here. Good morning, Casey. Good morning, Cindy. Good morning, Min. Hello again, Thika. Hello again. Not hello again, Ella. Hello, Ella. Nice to see you. Ying is here. Hello, Ying. Good morning. Sabrina's here. Good morning, Sabrina. Lily's here. Good morning, Lily. Jimmy's here. Hello, Jimmy. Hello again, Mashid and Jenna. Karen's here. Hello again, Karen. Hello, Pearly. Hello, Adelbert. Good morning. And Lim is here. Good morning, Lim. So, what we'll do today, good people, is we will review a little bit about what we learned about Athens democracy from the video. We're only about halfway through the video, but I'm going to I'm going to have us stop watching it there and sort of move back to the textbook. I kind of thought that documentary would be a little bit better, but I think it's okay, but it's not as good as I wanted it to be for our purposes. So I might not use that again the next time. But I think we saw some things that were valuable. So it wasn't a waste or anything. But I could find a better video, I think, to use. Caleb's here. Good morning, Caleb. Good morning, Carmen. So I'm going to steer us away from the video now and back to the textbook, but I do have some short videos for you to watch that talks a little bit about Athenian life and Spartan life, because we'll need to, it'll be useful for us to understand those so we can talk about the Peloponnesian War, which is going to happen next. So don't forget, on Monday we'll do a quiz on Monday on China. Yeah, so don't forget that. And then Tuesday I will assign the final research paper, the final assignment, which will take the place of the final exam for this course. Good morning, Michael. Okay, let's jump in. So on yesterday, we were in classical Greece, right? So Athens had sort of reformed itself into a democracy based on the reforms of Cleisthenes, and it went about running its affairs with the people in power, right? And so, so again, we're in the classical period. We're looking at democratic Athens. They have two wars with the Persians. The Athenians luckily win one war against a Persian invasion with the help of the Spartans. Hello, Aliana. With the help of the Spartans, they beat the Persians the first time. But then the Persians go away, but some of the Athenians fear that they will be back, particularly our friend Themistocles, right? And Themistocles is an Athenian general. He is concerned that the Persians will return and attack, and so when the Athenians find all that silver in their territory, Themistocles says, hey, don't spend this money on a tax break for people. Spend it on warships. Create a navy. And so the people listen to Themistocles, right? He makes a speech in front of the assembly at the Pnyx in Athens. He convinces the Athenians and they build that navy. And fortunately, they do that because the Persians do come back, right? And so the Persians and the Athenians have their sort of decisive battle at a place called Salamis. And so the plan for the Athenians, once they hear that the Athenians hear that the Persians are on the march, the Persians are coming to attack Greece, the Athenians send someone to the oracle of Apollo at Delphi, and the Apollo says that, Athens will be safe behind the wooden wall, which of course Themistocles interprets to be his navy. And so the Athenians do something pretty amazing. They actually abandon the city. They leave the city behind. and they move all of their people to the island of Salamis. And so the Athenian navy has a plan to try to engage the Persian navy at Salamis. And so if you'll remember, there was a bit of a ruse, there was a bit of a trap set for the Persians, right? Themistocles sent one of his guys to the Persian camp, and the story was that the Athenians were, they were kind of in a state of chaos, and everyone was panicking, and they were going to run away, and that if the Persians attacked the following morning, they would be able to catch the Athenian fleet trying to flee. They would win a decisive victory, and it would be glory all around, kind of thing. That was the story that was told to the Persians, and the Persians, unfortunately for them, believed it. And so the next morning they went sort of flying into the strait next to Salamis, thinking they would catch the Athenians running away. But of course that's not what they encountered, right? They encountered an Athenian fleet organized and ready for battle. And so I'm looking at this graphic here. I don't know why it says Egyptian fleet. That should say Persian fleet. But anyway, the Persian fleet has to sort of squish themselves to get into this narrow area next to Salamis. And of course, the Greeks are ready. And so a battle ensues. And of course, the Athenians' triremes, those wooden ships they built, they come into play here, and they start ramming Persian ships. And so, as we mentioned, there's a few hundred rowers on board each of these ships, and they basically turn themselves into missiles or torpedoes, and they smash into the enemy boats, poke a hole in them, and then back off really quickly and let the boat sink. And then the men who are floundering in the water get stabbed or cut up. Gross, right? But the end result of this is a decisive victory for the Athenians, right? The Persian navy is destroyed. They basically have to walk home, which is a little embarrassing and humiliating. And the Athenians, for their part, feel a sense of pride, right? A pride in themselves and in their city and in their democracy, right? They feel that their sort of democratic way of life was an important factor in them successfully defeating the Persians. And so not only do they think they're so great, but they feel that their democratic system is great as well. And it's democracy that should triumph over tyranny, right? That somehow democracy is more virtuous and more fair and better. And so the natural thing happened here, right? Of course democracy triumphed over tyranny, right? So before we go any further, what I would like to do is have you watch a short video. And so it's kind of cute, it's animated, and it just has to do with what life is like for ancient Athenians. And so we'll hear a little bit about what life is like for girls and what life is like for boys. And of course, as usual, I have a few questions that I would like to ask you. So what I'm going to do is I'm doing it right now, as you can probably tell. I'm going to pop these into Student Portal. Oops. I'll pop these into Student Portal. I'm going to send you a way to watch this video and to answer the questions, and then we'll come back and talk about what we've seen, okay? So the video itself is, 5 minutes long, so I will I'll turn you loose to go and watch the video. Again, it's in Microsoft Teams, the link and the questions. I'll give you about 8 minutes, and then we'll come back here and we'll talk about what we've seen. Okay, so go watch the video, answer the questions. Be back here in 8 minutes. Okay, people, and we're back. So, kind of a cute little video. It's animated, but it does give us just a little window into maybe the life of what some Athenians might have been experiencing, right? So, we're introduced to a married couple, right? Archaeus and Dexalea, and they have two girls and a boy, and they live their life in Athens, and so we get a little window into what some of the things that they might do in a day. And so what do? Well, the men and boys we see, Karen says, have to study, right? So they have a pedagogos, a teacher. If you've ever heard the term pedagogy or pedagogue, those both come from a Greek word for teaching. So we have a pedagogos who teaches the boys the things that they'll need to know, probably a little bit of poetry and literature, probably reading and writing, probably rhetoric, right? So this skill of speaking in public and convincing others, right? That's an important skill to have in a democracy. And so, we see that men and boys have a teacher, they have a pedagogos, they have to do lessons in the day. They also have to participate in the army, right? So military service is an important prerequisite for participations in Athens democracy, right? So you can certainly attend the assembly, but you certainly can't speak or vote unless you're a citizen, right? An Athenian citizen. Casey says they're in charge of the family. Yeah, so Archaeus is the father and he's the head of the family, right? He's in charge. He goes out into the world, he earns the money, he participates in the political life of Athens, and of course does military training as well. That's true. And the military training, we said, was important because city-states in this point in history don't usually have a professional army. The army is the male citizens, and so they all have to take military training because if the city-state is under attack, they have to put down their farming implements and put down their potting stuff and pick up a sword and go to battle for their city-state, right? We see that men participate in politics and own property. Yeah, we see that. That's true. Adalbert says boys go to school and learn to read and write and learn philosophy, and rhetoric. That's true. We also see that this particular family is a fairly wealthy family as well. So families that are kind of lower down on the economic ladder may have different lives, right? They may not participate in the sort of political atmosphere of Athens as much as Archaeus does, but Archaeus is, I assume, an Athenian citizen. So his mother and father were both born in Athens. He makes a good amount of money, and so he's able to provide education for his sons, and he's able to participate in politics in Athens. Okay, that's all good. Now, what do we learn about the role of women and of girls? What do we learn about their lives here? So Casey says, they're seen as a liability because they require dowries to find husbands. We were just talking about this in social justice, right? Where sometimes there are economic exchanges that go along with marriage, and so in order to marry his daughter to a man, Archaeus is going to have to come up with some sort of financial gift to give along with his daughter, right? And so in finding a good match for his daughter, marrying her to a good guy who's from a good family and maybe has some money, is going to take some money from Archaeus too. And so, but he feels he'll be able to come up with enough money for dowries to marry his daughters to guys from good families, right? So yeah, women are expensive in Athens because they are because they don't have political rights, because they don't often have jobs outside of the home. They have to be provided for, right? And so either husbands provide for women, or fathers provide for their daughters before that. And so we see a little bit of that. Women, the only way for women to acquire the resources they need in Athenian society is to be connected to a man, either their father or their husband. And the girls are being taught domestic skills as well. So yeah, the girls will be taught to cook and to look after the household and how to raise children, things like that, right? Important skills of the home. And we know, they can't participate in politics, so it's really only the men that go to the pnyx to debate decisions. And women can't own property in Athens as well, right? Okay, that's good. What aspects of Athenian democracy do we see? Because we do see some a little democratic storyline playing out here as well. What do we see? Right, so we see an assembly of citizens takes place at dawn, right? So I'm not sure if that's the first meeting, but the second one does, right? There's kind of an emergency meeting called by the assembly, right? So we see that. We see a meeting of the assembly at dawn. We see or we hear about voting, right? So there's a resolution. There's a resolution before the assembly. What should we do with the people of Mytilene, right? Because they revolted against Athenian rule, and that revolt was kind of put down, and control was reestablished in Mytilene. But now, what do we do with these people who revolted against Athens? How dare they? What should we do? That's the resolution before. That's the problem before the assembly. And the resolution is, we should execute all the men and enslave their women and children. Whew. Tough justice here, right? So we see the Athenians voting on that resolution, right? And we see that the debate is won by the people who say yes to that resolution, right? They say, let's send an army to Mytilene, we'll kill all the men and enslave their women and children, right? So that's the resolution that gets voted on. That's the one that gets passed. But then we see that kind of emergency meeting at dawn, right? So another resolution goes before the assembly, right? Something that kind of reconsiders the thing that they voted on the day before. And this resolution says, let's not kill all the men, let's just kill the leaders of the revolt, right? So they have another debate and discussion. People argue for and against. They vote again, and then this resolution narrowly passes as well. So they've changed the assembly. The Athenians have changed their mind. They're only going to kill the leaders of the revolt, not all of the men, right? So they send off another ship to catch the first ship and tell them that the assembly has changed its mind, which sometimes happens in a democracy, right? People change their mind. Okay, and the last one, what other aspects of social life, or what aspects of social life do we see here? We see the operation of a family in general, right? We see this family living their lives in Athens. We also see the institution of slavery, right? So this family has a Thracian woman living with them, and she is a slave, right? And so she does the kind of cooking and cleaning and chores around the house. Um, what else do we see? What else do we see? Let's see. Oh, okay, Karen says, "Oh, okay, yeah, we have friends meeting in the evening, and socialization during a plague." Yeah. Did you, when you heard about the picnics being tightly packed, did you immediately freak out and say, "Ah, social distancing"? Yeah. There was a plague in Athens during the Peloponnesian War, which I think you'll read about later today. I think. Yeah, there was one. A lot of people died. But we do see people socializing, right? So after Archaeus spends the day in the assembly, he comes home, and then later he goes to a friend's house. They have some wine, they have some food, and they debate, the political events of the day, right? So we have some, friends getting together for drinks or for a little house party, right? Which is, very similar to what people still do today, right? But these people are doing it thousands of years ago. What else do we see? So we see family life, we see the institution of slavery, we see that Thracian woman as a slave of the household. We see the education of the boys and the sort of instruction in domestic skills for the girls. We see people going to the agora, to the center of town where everyone gathers and talks. We see people participating in democracy at the picnics. And then we see Archaeus going over to a friend's house kind of in the evening to chat and have wine and talk about the way of the world, right? Which again is very similar to what people do today, which I think is cool. I always find it intriguing to think of people thousands of years ago doing very similar things to what we do today, which is exactly what that is. Okay. That's good. Now, so that's the Athenians, right? And so we kind of know who they are at this point. We've seen some video, we've talked about them for a little while, but the other character in this next part of the story is, of course, the Spartans. And you may or may not know anything about the Spartans already. They're kind of, they've almost kind of reached mythological status here in the West. In the ancient world, of course, they were a city-state in ancient Greece, and over time they become the dominant kind of land-based military power in Greece. And so in the map here you can see Sparta is just kind of to the south of Athens. You have to cross the isthmus to get to it, right? So you have to go through Megara and Corinth, and the Spartans inhabit a sort of general region called Laconia, okay? And the Spartans are kind of unique in ancient Greece for a number of reasons. They're kind of a very odd and very kind of extreme city-state in a number of ways, in terms of how their political system works, but also how their society works, how their social system works. Unlike democratic Athens, Sparta is an oligarchy. And so they have kind of an interesting mix of having two kings that are hereditary, and the kings are kind of the head of the military. And so if a king goes off to war and he gets killed, you still have one king back in Sparta who rules, right? So you've got a spare king just in case they get killed in battle. And they always had to agree on things as well, so that one king could not take power over the other. Now, Spartan society is interesting because it is designed to make Sparta into a military machine. And so everything that the Spartans do and think and believe is firmly focused on turning their men into the greatest soldiers in the Greek world. And it works. By far, the Spartans are the best soldiers that Greece has to offer. And one of the reasons for this is that their education begins very young. And so at the age of 7 years old, boys are sent to a military training school called the Agoge. And so for the next 13 years, they will go to this school, they will live at this school, and the school will turn them into full-on badass warriors. And so before we kind of dig into who the Spartans are and what they are, again, I'd like you to watch a little video. And so I have this information. I've just put it into student portal. I've just put it into Microsoft Teams. Short little video on what the Spartans were and what they were like. So again, watch the video, answer the questions. I'll see you back here in 8 minutes, and we'll talk about Sparta. Okay, so go to it. Okay, and we're back. So the first thing I asked you on that video was this: why are there no written records from Sparta, and how might this affect what we know about them? Why are there no written records, and how is this going to affect what we know? So Cindy says it was forbidden for the Spartans to keep records. So they knew how to read, they knew how to write, but they didn't keep formal records of what they were doing, right? That was forbidden. And so Aliana says this is because it was forbidden, yeah. So they may be embellished. Casey, yeah, there might be some changed details about their history. Yeah. So for the Athenians, all of that stuff we were talking about in Athens, we know because the Athenians wrote it about themselves in many cases, right? We know what the Athenians were thinking and feeling and what they did because they were writing stuff down, and they were often writing things about themselves. But the Spartans weren't writing anything down about themselves. And so we don't really know how they were kind of thinking and feeling about a lot of things. Karen says not allowed. Yeah, the accounts that we have are of captured and neighboring states. So the things we know about Sparta are not from the mouths of Spartans themselves, but it's about what other people said about them. And so sometimes it's not entirely clear how accurate and how factual people were being about the Spartans, but that's where our knowledge comes from. And so you heard in the video that they mentioned three very prominent Greek writers who are probably the first historians, the first writers of history in the Western tradition: Thucydides, Herodotus, and Plutarch. So the next question I asked you, and I might have answered this already, but that's okay, is how were boys educated in the agoge? And so we saw that girls and boys, just like in Athens, they were educated separately and differently. But the boys went to a school called the agoge. And Cindy says this is a place where, they turn Spartan boys into Spartan warriors, right? They teach them how to fight. Casey says they were sent there to train to be a Spartan warrior, encouraged to fight amongst themselves, and bullying was acceptable. Yeah, so in our schools, we don't like bullying. We don't like people picking on each other. For the Spartans, it was eat or be eaten, right? You had to, whatever it took for you to become tough and resilient, that was fine. And if you couldn't become tough or resilient, then you couldn't be a Spartan, right? So the Spartans didn't hold back. They let their kids fight. They encouraged their boys to fight. They encouraged them to bully others and then to stand up for yourself. And so it was a very assertive, aggressive, tough kind of education, right? Aliana says they're sent there to be trained for 13 years of harsh and sometimes brutal training, right? So they're bullied sometimes. They're kind of poorly fed. They didn't give them a lot of clothes, so they learned to become tough and deal with the cold and the heat. They had them just sleep on the hard floor. Lots of physical training, lots of fighting. Again, all designed to make them tough and resilient, right? Casey said, they're poorly fed. They had just little clothing. But they were taught how to read and to write and to dance, right? So again, we have this, very sort of brutal militaristic training, but they're also educated in kind of an intellectual way as well, right? They're taught to read and to write and to dance. Taught to fight, to steal, to deal with weather conditions and hunger. Yeah, so they were encouraged to steal as well, right? And if they they were allowed to steal, but if they got caught, they were punished very harshly for it. And so, again, they were encouraged to become strong, right, and crafty and resilient and able to deal with any circumstance. Chiffon, yeah, they trained for 13 years, and yeah, they were trained to fight when they were still young. So a pretty extreme form of education goes on at the Agoge, right? For these young boys who are sent there. Again, it's like a boarding school, and they are taught how to be the toughest, most disciplined warriors in Greece. And that's their life, and they'll continue to do that as men. They'll continue to train as warriors and to be professional, full-time soldiers. Okay, girls. So girls lived at home, but different from Athens, girls are given a formal education as well, right? So girls learn to read and to write, but they also learn arts and music and dance, and they're also allowed to take part in different sports, right? Sports that would normally be reserved for men in other parts of the Greek world, but the Spartan girls are encouraged to practice these sports as well. Yeah, they live at home with their moms as they attended school. Good. They learn sports. They study arts and music and dance and reading and writing. And yeah, javelin and horseback and discus. So all of those things are, in other parts of the Greek world, would have been things that only boys did. But the Spartan girls learn how to do that as well, right? Yeah, good. We heard about the diamastagosis. What's that? What's the diamastagosis? What's the diamastagosis? Yeah, it's kind of it's a ritual or a festival or I guess a ritual event, I guess you would call it. And it's where, so these teenage boys, these boys that were students in the Agoge, would be whipped on an altar in a religious sanctuary. And so, again, this is more training in terms of making them tough. And some young men would die in the process, right? But again, if you died, then clearly you weren't strong enough to be a Spartan soldier. So again, you can see how sort of brutal and extreme this kind of form of education is. And finally, the ultimate duty of Spartan citizens. And so Cindy says, it's to die for their city-state. They die so Sparta can live. So that's pretty extreme, right? The state, Sparta, comes before everything else. Comes before family, comes before friends, comes even before your own life. And you can see how formidable and frightening the Spartans might be for the rest of Greece, right? Because Athens' army were citizens, right? So maybe you made pots like Archaeus, who we saw in the last video. Maybe you were a farmer or whatever. But if Athens was under threat, you picked up your sword and you went to fight, but you weren't a professional soldier, right? You had some military training, but you were a farmer or a potter who just happened to have a sword and a shield, and you went off to defend Athens. But these guys, this is all they do, right? From 7 years old, their state turns them into a weapon, right? That's what their entire lives are about, is about military training, physical fitness. And so, they are by far the best warriors that Greece has, because that's all they do. They don't make pots, they don't farm. I'll get to why in a second. All they do is train themselves to be the best soldiers in the ancient world, which they basically are. But as you can see, it's a pretty extreme. Whoops. Yeah, it's a pretty extreme society. Okay, we've been working pretty hard here for an hour. Let's take a quick break, and we'll come back very shortly, and we'll talk a little more about Sparta and the Peloponnesian War. So I'll see you back here in 10. Okay. Okay, people. So, I'm talking about the Spartans here, another sort of prominent city-state and another character in the story that we're about to hear. And as you can see, they are radically different from Athens in a number of ways, right? Even though they share kind of an overall Greek culture with the Athenians, they would have had, the same gods and told the same stories like the Iliad and the Odyssey. They used the same writing system when they wrote and when they read. We still see a bit of a division in terms of women's role and men's role in society. We see all of these things and they're similar, but of course the two city-states are pretty wildly different as well. And we said that the Spartans have organized their society. The Spartans have organized their society in order to turn them into a military machine, okay? And the reason that they're able to do that has to do with people called helots, okay? And helots are kind of the people who live in the territory surrounding Sparta, so around Laconia and Messina. And they're kind of just regular people. They're kind of simple farmers. But what's happened is that the Spartans have conquered them and sort of put them under the control of Sparta. And so the helots are basically, in a way, they're basically enslaved by the Spartans. And so the helots continue to farm and to go about their lives in the countryside for the most part, but they have to send big chunks of their harvest to Sparta in order to feed the Spartan warriors. And this is what allows the Spartan men and women to not really do any productive work. And so you'll see there at the bottom, Spartan men are full-time soldiers, and so they're not available to carry out manual labor. So there's no Spartan potters or farmers or anything, because the Spartans are fully committed to being soldiers. That's all they are. And so they've kind of enslaved the population around them to get them to do all of the jobs that the Spartans aren't going to do. And so the helots farm and send agricultural produce to Sparta for the Spartans to eat. Helots serve as servants in Spartan houses and cooks and teachers and all kinds of things, because the Spartans are fully focused on military means. As we kind of saw in the video, the Spartan women have a reputation for being independently minded. They get kind of a very similar level of education to the boys, except without all of the military stuff. And so Spartan women can read and write and can think and speak for themselves. And so they have, even though Sparta is kind of a very extreme society in a lot of ways, there's a lot of equality and freedom in being a Spartan woman. And in the ancient world, you could certainly wind up in a society that was much more restrictive of you if you were a woman. So adult Spartan women have a lot of freedom, but they also have a comparable amount of education to men, and they will tell you about it because they have that freedom. And in society, they're respected as women who give birth to Spartan soldiers, and so they have there's a lot of respect accorded to women, particularly if they're able to have sons. So again, Spartans have a very strong division of labor, with men sort of being focused on being the best soldiers, and women giving birth to the best soldiers. But of course, Spartans do marry, but Spartan men lived in barracks. They lived in military groups. And so if they wanted to have Spartan children, sometimes they had to sneak away in the middle of the night, but that's okay. Um, because of how kind of extreme the Spartans are, and because they're kind of, kind of badass and kind of cool, um, they have kind of infused themselves into the cultural mythology of the West. And so we see teams named Spartans. There's a lot of things that are kind of borrowed from Spartan kind of lore and Spartan history. One of the things that the Spartans seem to have been good at, although we're not entirely sure how accurate these are, is, how action heroes in the movie, they often have these, cool lines that they say, when things are really dangerous, and then the action star comes off with this sort of, he says this thing that's really cool, like he doesn't care. The Spartans seem to have been really good at this, and maybe a little bit of inspiration was taken from them. And so there's a very classic threat that is issued by Philip of Macedon. So he's a Macedonian to the north, and Philip is he's threatening the Spartans here. And he says, if I invade Laconia, which of course is the area around Sparta, Philip says, if I invade Laconia, you will be destroyed, never to rise again. So he's threatening the Spartans. And the Spartans apparently responded with, if. Badass, right? Apparently there's another common saying that Spartan women would use, Spartan mothers or Spartan wives, when sending their sons or husbands into battle. And so they would say to them, come back with your shield or on it, right? So if they came back without their shield, it would mean that they were defeated or that they ran away because they were scared. If they came back on their shield, that would mean that they were dead, and their other Spartans were carrying their dead body back to Sparta on their shield. So yeah, come back with your shield or on it. Yikes. One last one. This is during the first battle with Darius the First, the Persian king, who's attacking the 300 Spartans at Marathon. And he says to the Spartans, lay down your weapons and surrender, and I'll spare all of you, right? I won't kill you all, just lay down your weapons. And apparently the Spartans respond with, come and get them, right? How badass is that? Again, we're not entirely sure how much of this is true, especially the things that they said, but they certainly were formidable soldiers in the Greek world. They certainly had a reputation for being so. People knew that the Spartans were serious warriors. But again, those kind of ideas and sort of the myth of what the Spartans were like have woven their way into popular culture in a number of ways. And so if you're familiar with this television show on Disney Plus, The Mandalorian, you will see a lot of does anyone watch this? Has anyone watched The Mandalorian? If you watch this show, I think that it's very clear that they have taken a lot of inspiration from the Spartans. I mean, you can see it in the helmet, right? The helmet is very similarly constructed. The Mandalorians are supposed to be kind of elite warriors in the galaxy. They have, nobody watches this, eh? Not that much. Okay. They're supposedly elite warriors. They come from a planet that has kind of a very warrior code. Um, Everything they do is centered around being the best warriors, and so they're really the sort of concept of this character in the show is very much, I think, very much influenced by um, the historical Spartans. And again, you don't even have to look much further than these two pictures to see some pretty clear similarities, but the similarities go deeper than that in the show. Okay, so back to Athens. When we last left that documentary, we said that there were the Athenians had defeated the Persians twice, right? They once it was a bit of a fluke. It was a surprise victory. The second time was at Salamis, where the Athenians lured the Persians into that narrow strait and then used their triremes to destroy the Persian navy and win a decisive victory. After the Persians leave, the Athenians set up the Delian League, right, which is a collection of Greek city-states in an alliance. They all contribute warships and later money to the league, and it's kind of a pact of mutual defense. It's kind of like NATO, but a few thousand years ago. But what happens, unlike NATO, what happens is that the Athenians kind of take this military alliance and they slowly, not so slowly actually, pretty quickly turn it into an Athenian empire where they start pushing around the other city-states and telling them what to do. So in the process, Athens becomes very rich, becomes very powerful. They're kind of the leader of the Greek world because they've turned themselves into kind of the head of a little empire of Greek city-states. And we see that some of the money that's coming in, apparently, from the Delian League, is used to beautify Athens. And so Pericles, who we heard about in the video, is kind of a prominent politician in Greece during this period. And so he seems to take some of that Delian League money that's supposed to be used for warships and defense and uses it to make Athens beautiful. And so we hear about him embarking on a massive building project on top of the Acropolis. And so this is when all of that stuff up there is actually built during classical Athens under kind of the leadership of Pericles. And so this is the Parthenon. And you can see the Parthenon has a collection of buildings and stoas and walls that are set up at the top of the Acropolis. In the documentary the other day, they mentioned that it was, in part, it was a treasury. It was a place to sort of keep money. But the biggest building up there that you can see is the Temple of Athena. And of course, Athena is the patron goddess of Athens. That's where Athens gets its name, from Athena. And yeah, so you can see in the past it was this massive building project on top of the Acropolis. So a few artist versions of what they think the Parthenon might have looked like in the past. In the present day, it looks a little bit different, right? Obviously, it's been 2,500 years or so since all of that stuff was built. Greece and the Parthenon have suffered through a number of wars and bombings, and so the Acropolis doesn't quite look the way it used to 2,500 years ago, but still very impressive and very beautiful thousands of years later. Inside the temple, we are told, was a massive statue of Athena, and the statue is gone. We don't know where the statue went. Sometime in antiquity, it was either removed or stolen. It used to be there, but of course is not there anymore. This is a model in a museum of what the statue of Athena might have looked like. So the Athenians are the head of their little empire, the head of the Delian League. They're the major power in the Mediterranean and in the Aegean at this period. And then they go ahead and decide to pick a fight with Sparta. Okay. And so Pericles convinces the Athenian assembly that it's their destiny to be masters of the Aegean, masters of Greece. And really the only power that stands in the way of them completely dominating the Greek world are the Spartans. And so, again, Pericles chooses to, he argues this before the assembly. The assembly votes, and they vote to pick a fight with Sparta, to go to war with Sparta. So they come up with a plan, and their plan is this. They are going to abandon the countryside around Athens, and everybody is going to hide within the walls of the city. Okay? So they're all going to sort of get behind the city walls. They're going to supply the city with their port at Piraeus, and so they're able to bring in food from Piraeus and bring it directly into Athens behind the walls. So they're able to get food into Athens. And then they're going to use their navy to attack the Spartans, but then they're going to run away. So this is the way in which these two sides are kind of unbalanced, right? So Sparta has the best soldiers on land anywhere in the Greek world. Nobody can challenge these guys on land. But the Spartans have no navy, right? They have no ships. Athens, we know, has a massive navy, but on land, they don't really have great soldiers, and they certainly don't have the soldiers to beat the Spartans. So these two sides are kind of unmatched. And so the plan, again, is to hide everyone in Athens behind the walls and use the Athenian navy to sail around, kind of go ashore really quickly, attack the Spartans quickly, and then hop in their ships and run away again. And so they're hoping that if they can sort of keep hopping around, it's kind of a guerrilla warfare kind of approach. If they keep doing this, eventually they will wear the Spartans down and win the war. So that's the plan. To find out if it works, you'll have to read. So I've posted this in Student Portal, okay? And so what I would like you to do, it's just a couple pages, it's just 3 pages. What I would like you to do is read that section of the text, answer the questions, and then I think we'll call it a day for today because it's Friday. You know, we don't need to go right to the end of class. So what I'll do is I'll end it here. I'll let you go read that section. Again, it's posted in Student Portal, so you can see the section you're supposed to read and the questions you have to answer. And we'll deal with the answers to these questions first thing Tuesday morning, because Monday we're going to do our quiz on, on China, okay? Right, so before we end it, before we break, questions, comments, clarifications, statements, jokes, anything. Cindy has no questions, no statements, no jokes. Well, there's a wow. Oh, yeah. Yeah, right. So they're quite, they're pretty extreme, those Spartans. I think they're very cool in some ways, but I don't know that it's not an ancient society I would want to live in, I don't think. But you got to be a little impressed, I think. So who was farming the land? If you're talking about, for the Spartans, it was the Helots. If you're talking about the land around Athens, nobody farmed it. So everybody just hid behind the walls and left it. The Spartans actually wound up going around and burning all of their farmland. But of course, it didn't matter because Athens was importing all of their food using their navy, using their ships. So they just abandoned the farmland, and the Spartans burned it later on. Okay, so Pearlie says no. KC, no, no, no. Okay. All right. I'm going to end it there. Go to Microsoft Teams, read that section of the text, answer those questions. We'll deal with them on Tuesday morning. Monday morning, the quiz on China. That's all I have to say. I hope everyone has a good weekend. Try to relax a little bit. Maybe get some sun. The weather's going to be really nice here in Vancouver. I don't know if you're not in Vancouver. I don't know what your weather is going to be like, but hopefully nice. And I'll see you all on Monday morning for the quiz. Okay, so good luck, study hard, and have a good weekend. Bye.